Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is on the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the SBIR program. This webinar is being given on March 5th, 2020. For those who might be viewing a follow-on recording of this, keep in mind that some items of this webinar might be specific to the current year's programs and other particular events that might be mentioned. So keep that in mind if you're looking at this down the road into the future. But welcome, my name is Robert Brook. I'm the Director of Federal Funding Programs here at the Center for Innovative Technology. CIT is a little bit about CIT. We're a state-funded nonprofit here, funded by the Commonwealth of Virginia. Our goal is to accelerate the next generation of technology and technology companies here across the Commonwealth through commercialization, capital formation, and market development initiatives. Three main key funding program support initiatives that we have include a robust SBIR support program, which I manage, and this event today is part of that program. We have several investment funds for high growth potential companies via the GAP Fund and the Virginia Founders Fund. We'll talk about these in a second here. And a grant funding program for technology companies and university research via the Commonwealth Research Commercialization Fund, or commonly known as CRCF. CIT's funding programs are available only to Virginia-based technology companies. There are different classifications of what constitutes a Virginia-based companies. There's some variations in these programs, but so look for the details on those. If you have offices across multiple states, there are some details on each program. We will not get into that today, but you can look into and find out more about those, hopefully at your convenience. Our GAP Investment Seed Fund and the Virginia Founders Fund, they provide anywhere from $50,000 or even less than that, up to $100K in seed funding for early stage Virginia-based technology companies that are looking for a high potential for economic return. They're typically on a pathway to secure other outside venture capital financing. So these are your typical entrepreneurial companies that are looking for venture capital and high growth. Not every company, most companies are not that. So, but if you are in that area, let me know, and I'm happy to find you the right contact to speak with. The Commonwealth Research Commercialization Fund, or CRCF, is an annual solicitation. We are about to we typically make the awards in May or June of each year, with the notices coming out originally, the solicitation in the fall, letter of intent deadline sometime typically before the holidays at the end of the year, and then a deadline of sometime in late January or sometime in February, depending on different deadlines for federal awards. So we try to make sure as many companies as possible are eligible for that. And they provide anywhere between $75,000 and $100,000 grants. There's 3 programs for the private sector. There's 2 programs for the academic and public sector. And there is an SBIR matching grant and an STTR matching grant. So relevance for today's webinar, there typically are caveats to restrictions for technology sectors that we list, level areas of interest that the Commonwealth's looking for, that the company's research must fit under, and there's other constraints as far as how much revenue the company has and how many SBIRs the company has secured. But these are smaller grants to help companies move the ball down the road a little further towards commercialization, as the title of the program denotes. There's information on the CRCF program. We do make little tweaks and changes every year, so you can sign up for listservs. I will generally add anybody on these kinds of workshops to those listservs, and I announce these in my newsletters that I send out. They'll add everybody here to that. So again, you have to be in the Commonwealth to apply. The federal funding assistance program that I manage, we work with over 300 plus companies, university researchers a year to help them learn about, understand, and apply for SBIRs. We're about 3rd in the country here, typically, with $140 million awarded in 2018 to Virginia-based companies. So we're doing pretty good. So if you're in Virginia, congratulations, you got a lot of support here available to you. We provide consulting, referrals to other outside mentors, SBIR consulting companies, lots of proposal workshops. I'll get to that in a second as well. Training, webinars like today. We have over 40 webinars that are recorded and available for viewing for free for Virginia companies on our website. and we can direct. I'll send a link to that everybody as a follow-up, so you have that direct link there for you. We have a small budget that I manage that to help companies who are applying for the first time for their first phase 1 or their first phase 2. To help you maybe afford to help hire one of the outside SBIR consultants that to make sure you do it correctly, and kind of what I always say, skin your knees a few less times before you are able to secure one, hopefully. Let me know. We typically want plenty of advance notice that you're interested. Typically require that you come to some of our training classes so that you have a good foundation on the program. So let me know. Further advance notice is the best. And again, I mentioned the matching grant programs and the webinars. So let me know. My email is below, and I'm happy to engage with anybody on a one-on-one call if I haven't talked to you in the past, and to kind of go over what we do, make some introductions, and kind of get you on a path for support. So we do have a few upcoming events. So again, for those that are viewing this in the future, this is for the year 2020. So April 14th, the SBA sponsors a road tour. We are actually going to be hosting part of that tour on April 14th. They're going to then be driving down to North Carolina and then South Carolina and Georgia. So we have them for a half day. And we're going to follow that with some other training, direct training for companies, meeting with multiple agencies, up to 15 agencies or so. We'll be there to meet with, do one-on-ones with, hear from, and then we have some proposal training to end that day. Then the following day, for those who are in the life science, biotech, medical product development sector, we're focusing on an NIH SBIR proposal prep workshop on the 15th, and that's just low cost for Virginia companies, just $75 for that full day of training. So look at that if you're interested. And then again, those are both in Richmond. And then we have some upcoming other more supportive programs for those who are in the government contracting arena. On March 24th, in Fairfax, and on May 12th in Norfolk, we're going to have a project management and budget prep cost proposal for federal contract session. These are going to help you figure out how to, manage your projects more effectively, how that management of projects can actually help you write better proposals to some of the agencies, specifically the contracting agencies, on how they like to look at your proposals and how you engage with them when you win the proposals, as well as the budgeting and the cost proposal part, which is all part of the reason. It's all about the money, right? As I always say, it's all about the money. So with that, if there's any other questions, let me know. In today's webinar, we're going to, if you have any questions, you can submit a question in the questions dialog box. We'll try to get to those. We'll have some Q&A at the end of today. If we can't get to your question for some reason, we'll have those, and we can follow up with you directly. We'll share the information for both myself and the instructor today, Mary from NIST. So if there's any questions, we can certainly answer those later as well. So a little bit about today's webinar. Mary's going to talk about NIST, a little bit about their mission, some general SBIR eligibility discussion, the rules, the basics of SBIR from a high level, a little bit about NIST labs and their programs, the funding amounts at NIST, their current solicitation that's actually out now, changes that are in this year's NIST SBIR solicitation, some of the discussion about the topics, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more how those are a little bit different these days and what they used to be in the past. Some basics on submission, evaluation, and award selection specific to NIST. Every agency has their own processes and peculiarities of sorts, just by who they are and what their missions are. Not peculiar, I didn't mean to say it like that, but it's but they do things certain ways, and so it's important to know how that might affect how you write a proposal. Go over a success story if we get a chance, and then some Q&A, and there's a few other things Mary's going to talk about. So with that, Mary Clegg, I'll go ahead and get her presentation up online here. And Mary has been with NIST for almost 19 years. Is that correct, Mary?
That is correct.
And you've been doing the SBIR program gig for from 15 plus of that, and so she's well versed in the NIST SBIR program, and so kind of knows where all the bodies are buried, like I know where the bodies are buried here. And so we know the programs, and really I think across all the agencies, SBIR programs, communication, understanding of the programs are very important, and how do you engage with the agencies, how do you talk to them, when you can talk to them, and also a little bit more about other people within NIST, what their role is in this process. So Mary, take it away. I'm going to go ahead and give you the presenter capabilities here. And
Okay, thanks, Robert.
it's all
It's
yours.
a pleasure to be able to talk with, I got it?
Great. Yep.
No, I don't think
Perfect.
I do. Yeah, we
Got
do.
it.
Okay, hang on.
There you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry about that. So it is a pleasure to be able to talk with all of you today. So thank you to everyone for your interest in our program and for making time for this webinar. I hope you find it useful. As Robert said, I'm the SBIR Program Manager at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Our FY 2020 Phase 1 solicitation opened on February 18th, so this is a perfect time to learn more about NIST and our program. But first, I'd like to give you a really brief overview of the SBIR program as a whole. Oops. Sorry about this. Okay,
Very
sorry.
sensitive.
So the program was founded in 1982, and it's been extended ever since. The most recent authorization takes us through 2022, and I'm still not on the right screen. I'm still not. I'm sorry, this is very sensitive. Nope. Okay, here we go. Every federal agency, Robert, it keeps moving even after I stop. Okay, there it is. Every federal agency with an extramural R&D budget over $100 million is required to set aside 3.2% of that budget for SBIR. There are 11 different agencies that participate in the program. Just briefly, agriculture, NIST, along with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, participate as part of Department of Commerce. We coordinate our programs to a small degree, but they are separate. Defense has multiple programs, Army, Navy, Air Force, as well as some of the additional components like MDA. Department of Education, Energy, Health and Human Services, that's mainly NIH, Homeland Security, Department of Transportation, EPA, NASA, and NSF, the National Science Foundation. So as a whole, there's over $3 billion available to small businesses through SBIR each year. And this is a very small portion of that, and I'll talk a little later more specifically about NIST budget. Every agency has their own program, and while we all work under the broad guidelines provided by SBA, the Small Business Administration, every agency runs their programs a bit differently. Let me see if I can do this one a little better. Yes. So the program goals are listed on this slide, so I won't read them to you, but I will say that there is an increased emphasis on commercialization, number 4. That's how the success of the program is ultimately defined. Has the awardee been able to bring a product to the market? So the focus of SBIR is on performing R&D. It's not for just purchasing equipment or for commercializing a technology that's already been developed. It's also not just for business startup expenses. SBA has developed a pretty great website that provides all the general information you need to know about the SBIR program, as well as links to agency program websites. The URL is very easy to remember. It's just sbir.gov. On their website, you'll find tutorials about each of the agencies. There's frequently asked questions, and there's a lot of eligibility information, which we'll look at pretty briefly on the next slide. I think I'm getting better at this. No, I'm not. This is a pretty simple look at program eligibility requirements. So basically, to be eligible to submit an SBIR application and receive an award, the business must have no more than 500 full or part-time employees. That's how SBA defines a small business, but the majority of our applicants are much, much smaller. The business must be primarily U.S. owned and located. That means that at least 51% of the business is owned by either a U.S. citizen or permanent residents, and the business is located in the U.S. The business must be organized for profit. only profit businesses can apply, no nonprofits or universities. The PI, the principal investigator, must be primarily employed by the awardee, meaning he or she cannot be fully employed elsewhere. And while awardees may use consultants or subcontractors, for phase one, 2/3 of the work must be performed by the awardee, and for phase two, it's half. This is a pretty quick look at what can be a quite complex issue. The SBA website, again, SBIR.gov, provides a lot of additional information that may be pertinent to your specific situation, and I encourage you to take a look at that site. There we go. I apologize.
Do you want the mission or the labs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which one?
This one.
It's
mission.
There we go. Got it. I got it. I'll take it. There you go.
Yep.
Mission.
No, that's not it.
I got it. I get it. There we go. Right there.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, thanks, Robert. Okay, so now let me tell you a little bit about NIST, and then I'll get into some specifics about our SBIR program. So NIST has a broad mission. We promote U.S. innovation and competitiveness by advancing measurement science, standards, and technology. So NIST research helps to develop the national technology infrastructure. We provide tools that U.S. industry needs to compete in a high-tech global marketplace. We work in a wide range of sectors like nanotechnology, quantum information, cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing, all of which need technical support to be able to succeed and grow. NIST provides that support by developing new technologies, by advancing standards, and by providing technical evaluation tools. You want to give me the next one, Robert?
Sure. Cool.
This will give you an idea of how NIST is organized. We have a total of 5 laboratories. The first 2, beginning on the left, address measurement science. The next 3 focus on technology. We also have a user facility as well as several extramural programs. Our headquarters is located in Gaithersburg, Maryland. That's where I am. We're about 20 miles north of DC. We also have a large facility in Boulder, Colorado, as well as several other smaller locations. In all, there are over 5,000 federal employees and associates working at NIST. Let me try it.
Okay, hold on. I was looking at a question.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll just ask you to do it then. Okay, next, please.
1 second. I'm trying to disengage the question. Okay, there's a few questions. So for questions, we'll let Mary get through a couple of her slides here, and we'll kind of get to those. I'll start reading those, and at an appropriate time, I'll read the question, and we'll convey the answers. It might be near the end, so thank you. There you go. There you go.
Yep. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so SBIR at NIST. All the SBIR programs have 3 phases. The phases are the same, but the dollar amounts and the periods of performance differs among the agencies. This chart is specific to NIST. Phase 1 is used to determine the scientific and technical feasibility of a project. Our award is for a maximum of $100,000 for a 6-month period. Phase 2 is where the actual R&D takes place. NIST award is up to $400,000 for 2 years. And then phase 3 is the commercialization stage. No SBIR funds can be used for this phase. It can be federal funding, just not SBIR dollars. One of the best parts of SBIR, as well as phase 3, is that it can be sole sourced, which makes procurement very easy. Any federal agency can purchase a product that was developed through SBIR without putting out a solicitation. NIST annual SBIR budget is generally just over $4 million. That's very small compared to many of the other agencies, but we do have a great program, and I think there are some real advantages to being small. We get to know our awardees. We usually give out somewhere between 10 and 15 phase 1 awards. It varies from year to year, but for phase 2, we generally give out about half of our phase 1 awardees get phase 2 awards. Next, Robert, please.
Sure.
This is our timeline. We have one annual solicitation. As I mentioned before, our FY 2020 solicitation is currently open. You can find our solicitation either on grants.gov or through a link on our website, which is on this slide down at the bottom. So here's the schedule for phase one. We opened last month and we'll close in April 22nd. After the solicitation closes, all proposals go through an administrative review process where we look for things like missing forms or required proposal parts. Proposals that pass the administrative screening go through a technical evaluation, which I'll talk more about later, and then we make the award selections. Those selections are forwarded to the NIST Grants Office. The Grants Office is the office that makes the awards. Notifications for both awardees and non-awardees don't go out until we get the okay from them. The period of performance for phase one generally starts in late summer and goes on for 6 months. Near the end of phase one period of performance, we open a phase two solicitation that's only open to the previous year's phase one awardees. And then we go through a similar evaluation and award process for phase two. Our awards are cooperative agreements. It's a type of grant that allows some collaboration between NIST and the awardee. Next slide, please. For those of you who've looked at NIST solicitations in the past, I want to make sure that you're aware of a few changes that we've made this year. We changed the page limit for the technical proposal portion of your application from 25 to 15 pages. We know that the whole process is burdensome, and while there are some required registrations and forms that we don't have any control over, this is one thing that we can do to try to reduce that burden at least a little. We're also limiting the number of applications that each small business can submit to just one. While it's happened a few times in the past, it's unlikely that one small business is going to receive multiple phase one awards. Because we give out so few awards, we want to spread them out the best that we can. So this is one way we've thought of to decrease everyone's workload. Just give us your very best idea. We've also made a change to the way we're doing TABA, the Technology and Business Assistance. In the past, we had a vendor that provided this service. We no longer provide a vendor. You have to request additional funding in your application and find an appropriate vendor on your own. Next slide, please, Robert.
Sure. And that's described in your solicitation, what that means and the amount, the limits and stuff.
It is, yes.
It's about like $5,000 or so for phase one or so. I don't know.
Well, for phase one, it's $6,500. Okay. For phase two, it can be up to $50,000, but that comes out of your award. Where for phase one, the $6,500 is on top of the $100,000 award.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, I in other states have knowledge of access to some of the vendors out there that do these things. Do you guys also provide a listing of folks that if they had questions for you guys, or do you kind of let them find them on their own?
We actually cannot give out a list because it looks like we're giving preference to one vendor over another, and we haven't come up with a way to be fair. So we just kind of leave it on the awardee.
Sounds good. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's our 2020 topics. It's not new this year, but if you've ever looked at the NIST SBIR solicitation in the past, you've seen that we've had some very, very specific subtopics. It's a process that we used for many years, but there were increasing problems with the subtopics being so specific that we weren't allowing for the innovation that the program is all about. And because the scientists in our labs were the subtopic authors, they were unable to have discussions with potential applicants. So in an attempt to increase the quality and innovation of proposals we receive, we're using the same model that we used last year. We only have one very general topic that includes some of the broad areas that NIST works in. Those are the ones listed on this slide. There's more description of these areas in the solicitation. They're in section 9. But remember, you can't just send us a proposal based solely on anything that fits into these broad categories. It has to fit into our mission, measurement, standards, and technology. And it has to either be a current NIST technical program or a NIST patented technology. We ask that you show how your proposed work fits into NIST mission by providing the URL of a NIST website that's in the same area as your work. So for example, we wouldn't accept everything in the cybersecurity area, but we will accept proposals that deal with cybersecurity and identity management, a current NIST project. And as always, we always accept proposals that build on a currently patented and available for licensing NIST technology that will produce a product or service that can be commercialized. That's a little bit complicated, and it's something that we had trouble with last year. I tried to write it a little bit more clearly in the solicitation, but we can talk more about it later if you have questions.
Okay.
Can you move to the next one, Robert?
Sure.
Proposal submission. So you've looked at the schedule, you've determined you have time to submit an application. You've looked at the topic in section 9, and you've found in this web page of an area that you're working in. So what do you do next? I'm sorry to say that you still have to read the entire solicitation. There may be some sections that you can skim, but there are a lot of requirements, and you need to make sure that you understand all of them. I'm trying to give you a complete overview of the program, but please don't leave this webinar thinking that you don't need to read the solicitation. There are many more details. This slide lists all of the required forms that need to be included in your application. I'm not going to go over them because while they look somewhat overwhelming, most of them are pretty standard. I do want to talk some about the technical content. It's kind of in the middle of the list. Section 3 of the solicitation covers the technical content portion of the application. So the technical content includes the cover sheet and the technical proposal. The cover sheet is just a form that's included in the appendix of the solicitation. It's where you self-certify your eligibility and provide some administrative and identifying information. The technical proposal is the core of your application. Again, in section 3 of the solicitation, we specify, I think it's 14 different items that you must include in the technical proposal. Things like the project objective and a work plan and potential for commercialization. But it's up to you to decide how to best tell your story within the required items in the page limit. Next slide, please.
Sure. Oops. Oh, there we go back. Here we go.
Yeah, that's it. So grants.gov. It's the website that most federal grant solicitations appear on. Some of the larger agencies have their own tools, and contracting agencies use a different site. I'm not sure what it is. Again, you can search for the NIST solicitation on grants.gov, or you can find it through our website. I honestly don't know a whole lot about grants.gov because I've never had a need to use it, and I've heard mixed reviews on how user-friendly it is. But all of our applications to our program must be submitted through grants.gov. But before you can submit, you need to be registered. This is something that you need to start early. I'm told it can take days or even up to 2 weeks. So don't spend all your time writing a proposal and then be ready to submit the day that it's due without being registered first. You want to make sure you get those out of the way. You also need to be registered in SAM, the System for Award Management, to be able to register in grants.gov. There's an additional registration that's pretty quick. It's on SBIR.gov, the company registry. I think that one's pretty quick again, but you need to include that registration as one of the attachments to your application. You also need to have a DUNS number, which I think most people have. But if you don't, you should probably do that first. Some of the required forms are standard at grants.gov. The system won't let you submit an application without these forms. All the other forms are attachments to the proposal. The system will provide you with confirmation of receipt and a tracking number, but it does not look for the required attachments. There are instructions on how to check for attachments in the solicitation, but again, I'm not completely sure of the process. If you should have trouble with attachments or just need to make a change after submission, you do need to completely redo the whole submission process, not just pieces, it all has to be in one package. If we see two proposals from the same company, we're only going to evaluate the one with the latest submission date or time. There is a grants.gov user guide and help desk. You can find both on their website. I'm told that the help desk is pretty responsive, but don't count on them being available at the last minute before the deadline. Again, the best piece of advice I can give you for all of this is just to start early. Next slide, Robert.
Come on. There you go.
This is the proposal review and evaluation, and I apologize for the number of words on this page, but it's important information. So as I said earlier, after the solicitation closes, proposals go through an administrative review. And we look for things like eligibility, missing forms, being within budget. In the past, our legal department required us to reject any proposal that was missing a mandatory item. They've become somewhat more lenient, but you really should be careful about making sure that you've included all the required pieces. So proposals that pass the administrative review move on to the merit evaluation. In the merit evaluation, at least 3 NIST employees review and evaluate each proposal based on these criteria. And these are taken directly out of the 2020 solicitation. Is the technical approach comprehensive, feasible, and demonstrate a clear understanding of the research area? Are the proposed staff and facilities appropriate? Will the proposed research program lead to a product or service with a viable path to commercialization? What are the anticipated benefits of the resulting product or service? It doesn't need to be earth-shattering, but it should make a difference. Does the proposed commercial product or service relate to the goals of a NIST technical program and mission? So these evaluation criteria are all things that you should keep in mind when you're writing your proposal. Next slide, please. No, back one.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Then after completion of the merit evaluation, the proposals and evaluations come back to the SBIR program office, where we place the proposals in order of score and review all of the evaluator comments, because we find those very useful in trying to decipher what they mean by their score. So the final award selection is based on the scores and comments. Diversity across program areas. For example, we wouldn't give all the awards to proposals dealing in cybersecurity. Projects in areas of manufacturing or energy efficiency, those are SBA program priorities. Projects that include participation by women and or socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, and also businesses from hub zones or underserved states. Applicants with less than 20 past SBIR awards, we tend to like businesses that are relatively new to the program. We look to see if there's other similar federally funded research and availability of funding. How many awards can we fund? All awardees and non-awardees are notified at the same time, although you may have a clue if you start receiving phone calls from our grants office asking for additional information, which often happens. All awardees and non-awardees receive copies of their evaluations. We ask the reviewers to provide useful comments, but some provide more than others. Next, Robert. So I would be remiss if I didn't include a slide about fraud, waste, and abuse, FWA. It's a very hot topic right now. All the agencies have been reviewed for compliance by GAO, the Government Accountability Office. It's not that we didn't take it seriously before, but the GAO review has pushed it to the forefront. Here's the definition of fraud taken from the policy directive. I'll give you just a moment to read it. A few examples of fraud, waste, and abuse are providing false information about your company, using SBIR award funding for something other than what was specified in the proposal, or inflating labor costs. Should you submit a proposal to NIST, you'll learn more about FWA, because one of our requirements is to complete a training video. It's not very long. It's on our website. The video was created by DSC's OIG, the Office of Inspector General. This isn't to scare you away, but it is something that you need to be aware of because you can be prosecuted and either fined or jailed. One of the examples we have on our website is a case involving two people charged with fraudulently taking $10 million worth of SBIR funding. They submitted proposals using false identities, and they had lied about their facilities and their costs. They were each sentenced to jail time. This is one of the most extreme cases I've heard of, but again, you need to be aware of it. Next slide, please. This is an example of a NIST SBIR success story. It's not a new NIST success story, but I keep it in all of my presentations because I think it's a good example of how NIST cuts across many scientific fields. NIST isn't typically associated with medical devices, but because this work involves measurements and standards, it's well within the scope of what we do. And it's also a good example of not pigeonholing what you think an agency wants just by the name of the agency. So the success story, High Precision Devices received Phase 1 and 2 awards to refine a breast phantom that was built by NIST. Without going into any of the details, it's a tool that allows users to test the accuracy of their imaging system against a traceable standard. At last report, and it's been a while since I've checked in with them, HPD had sold 5 of the devices, and one was going to be used in a clinical trial looking at alternative breast cancer therapies. Next, please, Robert. This is our website. We're part of the NIST Technology Partnership Office. This is where we post announcements about solicitations and awards. There's a link on this page to join our mailing list. We promise not to overwhelm you with details. We just send out important notifications. It's also a good place to look at previous solicitations as well as all of our awardees. Next, please. And while we have an hour for this webinar, I didn't want to overwhelm you with too much information or get too bogged down in details. I hope that your main takeaway is that it's a great program that's worth looking into. If NIST doesn't fit your needs, I encourage you to look at other agency programs. So with that, I'm going to stop and let you ask questions.
Sure, we do have
my contact information.
And we've got some questions.
If you think of questions. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you can write them in the questions box, and I'll announce the question, and we'll kind of see how we can answer these. First of all, from earlier on when we first started, does it make sense for a brand new one-person business that's looking to grow to go after SBIRs? And I guess the comment would be, for myself, would be, if you are developing new innovative technology and you're looking for at least a couple year development cycle of that, you don't have it mostly built, you just need a little bit of money to finish it, that's not SBIR. So you need to be able to, phase 1 is a feasibility study, phase 2 is more build out and further testing and engagement with customers and that sort of thing. So you have to kind of have the right scale. Now, depending on if you're software, hardware, medical, the timelines for technology development can be very different depending on the kind of technology you're building. And we can get into some of that if we talk to you, or if you look at the topics that are out there. I hope that answered some of that question. And as Mary said, that the maximum size of our company is 500. The average size company getting awards across all agencies is somewhere in the 10 to 15 person range. I think if that's sort of the kind of a number out there.
I would agree with that, yes.
There are a lot of companies that are smaller, and there's a lot of companies that are bigger, but I think the average is that there's you have more than just having a small company is not that bad. Now, what I counsel companies on is some agencies like some sort of preference for working with startups. That would be I think National Science Foundation typically talks about. They love working with first-time applicants and brand new companies. They feel that the companies have, if it's got the right technical person, that technical know-how and the primary investigator is the key to these projects in the early phase, and their goal is to help provide the funding. And the NIH, I think, has a similar concept of, they look at the technical the technical description of what you're accounting for, and also the But a lot of times these ideas come from one-person companies, and they don't discount that. They want you to have a plan, and the average SBIR does have, the SBIR has, you can outsource up to 1/3 of the project to outside consultants, statisticians, other people, rent space, CMD rent equipment, all these equipment is part of your indirect rates. There's all kinds of ways to build this together, and they allow you to outsource some stuff because they know the average company doesn't probably usually have all of the know-how, the equipment, and all the things that are needed to put a compelling proposal together. They allow you to outsource some of that. You can't outsource more than 1/3 of that phase 1 project. However, someone asked the question of, if we hire contract labor, not a separate company, how is that accounted for? Do you have any thoughts on that, Mary? If
I'm not sure I understand the question.
If you hire contract labor, so you have to be, you can outsource some of the work.
That would still be counted in the 1/3 that somebody else can do outside of the small business that receives the award.
Right. Oftentimes, if it's a key person, if it's the primary investigator, a key person that they have some expertise that not everybody has, you're going to be listing them as key people, and you want to put them by name. Now, it's going to be at the time of award, not a time of application. So you want to be able to have these things in place. Should you be awarded, be able to get them to be part of the team in the project. As Mary mentioned, the PI has to be full-time employed at time of the award. And for a very small 1 or 2 person company, they could be 50% on this project, for example, or more. They have to be 50% or more at the company, not necessarily all the project work. So it's a little bit different there. And you can certainly hire, if there's any basic engineer with a 4-year degree, you can hire. You don't have to list, and they're going to do certain types of work that is pretty standard for the discipline. You don't need to list them by name, but you're going to be indicating you're going to be hiring one to be part of this. So there's very difference between a key employee and other people on the project. Engaging with outside universities, you can do that. There's a lot of different ways to build that team. It says here, by phase, what are the technology readiness levels? So are you familiar with TRLs, Mary, and how they look at comparative phases?
Only basically. I know that's a DoD thing.
Yeah. I mean, generally a phase 1 is going to not be at TRL 1. It's usually there's some level of preliminary data that's created. It could be usually, whereas the phase, usually an SBIR, when you end the phase 2, it's usually not at a 9 or a 10. It's usually somewhere even earlier than that. So, which means that you usually need other money outside of the program. And I think depending on as I mentioned, the kind of technology, there could be different, there's not exact fit for TRLs and SBIRs. It's sort of, there's some specificity, but it's not always exact. But yeah, the DoD and NASA, they have a history of TRLs, where NIST doesn't think that way, but probably wouldn't hurt to understand the TRL process. Are you looking for submissions in the area of the Internet of Things?
Yes, but again, it has to fit in with the NIST mission, so it can't just be anything on the Internet of Things. You need to look at the NIST external website. It's pretty well organized by project and program, and find something that is close to what you're going to apply for, something that aligns well with your work.
And as you mentioned that, you said last year you changed a little bit. You have these more not only prescriptive topics you're looking to award. You're encouraging them to look at these areas and align them with an existing project that NIST has, and that you encourage them to reach out to those points of contact at NIST to discuss the idea, correct?
Yes. Most of those project pages have contact information, and we welcome you to start a discussion with that project leader.
Great. And since NIST isn't going to be the buyer of this technology, they're like the NIH and NSF, they're very willing to engage with you on the overall discussions of the things and the topics and the what you're making sure there's a fit for what you're doing, align it with the correct thing they're working interested in funding. Whereas the DoD and NASA, for example, they don't allow that discussion to take place after the solicitations formally open. DoD has a pre-solicitation period where they do allow that, then they open it for, and they close that communication off. Whereas you guys are more willing to discuss up until later on the process.
Right, so there's a small caveat with that, is you never know who you're going to get as that technical contact. Some people are very, very happy to discuss at length with you what you're doing and what they're doing, and to figure out how it could work together and get excited about the innovations. Other people are probably not going to answer their phone or not return your phone call, and I have no control over that, and I apologize for that, but it's just kind of the way it works right now.
So how would someone submit new cybersecurity code using blockchain? I'm guessing that's an idea for a topic. You have to see if that's a topic area. And talking to this, they're looking at their cybersecurity program, and that would be a great question to ask the cybersecurity program project that they have, to see if blockchain is one of those areas that they're interested in funding. That's that was a perfect example of a kind of a question to ask. Make sure before you go through all the effort to engage with and find out, is blockchain an area of interest? I do know that other agencies like NSF do have areas of interest of blockchain. I know that companies, I've worked with a company that actually they've applied for blockchain technology in all kinds of agencies, because it could be used for many different things. So that's an area of interest. Let me see here. DUNS numbers are going away. When so DUNS numbers are, well, they're not going away. What's happening is the EIN DUNS are being incorporated into the SAM registration process. So I think and also I think DUNS actually, they're going to go to another system soon. It's not as obviously I don't think that's totally done deal yet. I don't remember exactly where that is in that process. Are you familiar with that, Mary?
Okay, I did not know that, no.
They're going with another organization that does the same numbering, and I think it's going to be incorporated along with the SAM process. So when people register for SAM, and if they're a new company and they can get their SAM, their EIN, and their whatever is now going to be not DUNS, the new numbering system. I think that's a process that's being taken by a lot of in the procurement technical assistance centers can help with that. So if you're not familiar with this process, you need to get that set up. Look at research. Google PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and there's usually one in every state. There's 4 or 5 here throughout Virginia, and they can help with some of that registration, understanding that process. And they've actually been giving classes and stuff on the new SAM program. So, and we will share the slides with everybody. We'll send an email out with the attachment of the slides. And we will actually be posting this recording as well. So you can always look on our website in the recorded webinars and re-register, look to view. There's no fee to do that, so you can look at that. If you have okay, here's a long question. If you've got some technology developed already, but want to basically set aside the last technology like a demo and start with a brand new approach, learning from your last mistakes, can that be used for SBIR, even though some of the former technology can be used or implemented in the project? So a lot of people,
if I'm understanding, go ahead.
Yeah, well, some of the ideas, I think people, you never have a zero, most people don't really have nothing started on the technology they're looking to build. They usually have more than just an idea. They've got some level of understanding of engineering, of know-how. Their background allows them, and they know kind of what they need to put in. So some people call this preliminary data. Maybe you've done a few tests yourself, but you haven't really documented this stuff. You need to go back in a systematic way to test things, measure things, validate things. So sometimes it's going back and redoing some things you kind of think in a formal process. That's what SBIR feasibility is, kind of measuring things, validating some ideas you may have had, adding enough times to test certain things to make it a valid test, measuring it so many times at certain levels. At the end of phase one, you have to say, look, we thought we could do it. We did this, this, and this, and we measured it. And at the end, we proved feasibility. Obviously, that's different depending on if it's hardware, software, systems and different things, medical. But generally, phase one, you need to measure something. And so going back and putting some things together that you've already kind of done, but in a scientific way to validate and test it. If there's still questions, you haven't published data on this, it's just something you've been working on, you can go back and get, that wouldn't be the crux of the whole project, but I think you want to make sure you don't point out that you already know this all works. But there's sort of a scientific way of measuring your thoughts and your things you think you want to do. Go back and measure it, and you get to show your data in these projects. You're putting it out there, so to the teams that are reviewing your proposals. So
I think it makes for a stronger proposal to be able to say, hey, we've been working in this area, we know that this doesn't work, and now we're going to take it this way, and this is why we think. I think it shows your commitment to the project as well as, just the ways that you want to advance it. I think that's a good thing.
And a lot of people want to say, oh, can I go direct to phase two because I know it works. I say,
not with NIST. No.
Well, not with NIST. Some agencies do have a direct to phase two program, but you actually have to go in and show what you did in your own phase one, what you did, how you tested, what you measured, and you have to go back and you're not getting paid for it, but you have to kind of show what you did. Not all agencies do that, including NIST. They don't have that. So there's a fine line there. So you need to be testing something and validating something, and if you definitely know it works and you've published it and you're still already selling technology that has that, it's a little bit hard to validate getting money for feasibility if you've already selling stuff, right? So that would be one of those lines of fraud, waste, and abuse that Mary mentioned, that if they find out you're getting paid to do something you're already selling, for example, that's not the question, the one person that asked the question is saying that, but so there are sort of nuances to some of these things. And some of the training classes we kind of go a little more depth into what goes into a phase one. And there's a lot of it. You're going out and you're citing other research so that you get identifying the state of the art, and you put your idea. Then your scope of your phase one typically isn't that big. There's a few key things you're trying to validate and study, and part of the big part is like, are you building something people want? Despite the agency wanting it, do you have a pathway to the market? And that's in a whole nother discussion of commercialization approach, interest by customers. Have you talked to customers? Do you know what that pass-fail line would be for your measurement in phase one? And that is all part of that phase one proposal development, is the measurement of, well, great, if you can make it better, but how much better? How much better does it need to be for those people that those customers to actually change their entire supply chain or change their vendor? Is it going to be cheaper? Is it going to really be better? If it's going to be better, how much better? And that's where you want to engage with the customers on that end of things. Can I outsource the full grant to an outside university? That would be a no.
No.
So agencies, and NIST does not have an STTR program. All SBIRs and STTRs have outsourcing capability. SBIR allows you to outsource up to 1/3 of the phase one project, typically in award dollars, depending on how much the award is for. So 1/3 of that. That could be a university. It could even be a couple of universities. It could be a university, another small business. It could be Lockheed Martin. You could outsource that 1/3 to anybody, assuming you're getting the right intellectual property agreements, making sure they're the right people to do the work. And it makes sense. We usually don't say force you to do it just to do it. It doesn't look better just because you're working with them. They're bringing something to the team that you don't have, right? You can, in a phase two in SBIR, you can outsource up to 50% of the project to a university. And that's TTR, which only the bigger 5 agencies have: DoD, NASA, Energy, NSF, and NIH. The STTR requires you to outsource up to at least 30% of the project to a nonprofit, and then you can actually outsource up to 60% of that phase one to the university. So if you've got a big lift needed from the university, and then you can target those other larger agencies that allow for that, you can do that. There are some PI requirements that some agencies, all except for NSF, allow the PI in the STTR program to be from the university, which is kind of a neat thing. I always sometimes question that. In the realm of the NSF, they were like, why would you want even the person who knows a project, the science, most technical person on the whole team isn't even employed full-time by the company, question mark. But you know, if that's something you need to do for phase one, because then you can go to a phase in phase two, and you can go back to an SBIR, depending on what that needs. So the agencies have kind of crafted these programs to meet their needs and meet your needs actually. So you know, you can't outsource a university. It's your grant, and you can outsource part of it, but not all of it. To get clinical data, so that was part of that same person's question. Can I outsource a full grant to outside university to get clinical data? The outside university can be in the UK, or does it have to be in the US? So to get clinical data, I'm not quite sure what you can, if you're needed to try to get data to be part of your team and project, you can certainly source the data from the university if that is part of the it could, if you need to buy data, it might that could actually may not even be part of the outsourced amount. You could just basically, it could be some of the, there's ways to kind of use some of the things you're just buying to put part of the project is not really outsourcing the work. It's actually buying. It could be part of the indirect costs or other direct costs, depending on what you really mean there. I'm not quite sure. I'll have to find out more about that. They can't outsource any work to anything outside the U.S. So the university would have to be a U.S. university, unless there's any. Mary, do you guys know of any variances?
There are certain circumstances. If a product or service is only available through a foreign source that you can get special permission, but I don't know that it's ever been granted.
Right. So now, if a foreign university has a relationship with a U.S. university, they maybe have sort of things they trade and work with. Or if it's a part that you want, something you need to buy from another country, you can't buy it directly. You have to buy it through U.S. distributors. So maybe there's relationships that a university has with another university where they get the information, then you engage with the U.S. university. I'm not sure. I'm guessing that takes place out there in the world.
That's a very specific question, and I think that if it came up at NIST, we would have to look at carefully and find out the specifics.
Yeah, specific what they're doing. But yeah, so generally, you're buying things from U.S. But if it's a medical products you need to buy or testing equipment, you have to buy that through a U.S. distributor of that product. So there has to be, so you're buying it from a U.S. company that's acquired it from another. You can't buy direct. Unfortunately, that's just how you can't use, cheap programmers in other countries because they cost less. You have to use U.S. programmers, and that, and also this always comes up. I can, but if I work 80 hours a week, I can keep my full-time job somewhere else and then do 40 hours on this, and I can be the PI, and that would be a no as well, because the government's not trying to create sweatshops, even though being an entrepreneur is a sweatshop at times, but the government doesn't want to encourage that to happen because they know that that creates a lot of issues and conflicts of interest, and also ill health sometimes. See if there's any other questions. There's no other questions right now. So one of the, we talked a little high level about these stuff, and one of the, as I mentioned to you earlier, a lot of the states, most of the states have training programs. We run a lot of workshops and engagements with consultants we make referrals to make sure you have the right foundation you're building. So we would encourage you to look for resources in your state. I'm happy to, the SBA has a listing. If you go SBIR.gov, there's a listing of resources by state in that, especially if you're not from Virginia. If you are from Virginia, I'm the resource in Virginia. There's other entities I work with and refer you to in the state as well. The conference we're doing with the SBA's, the SBA road tour. They're running this in the Southeast. They're going to be doing two or three other road tours across the U.S. this year. They're not hitting every state, but they're hitting a good, I think about 20 states in those 3 or 4 tours. Great opportunity to meet with reps one-on-one and discuss interests and processes and programs. They're going to be doing panel discussions. I'll send everybody on this webinar today an information on the upcoming tour we're hosting in Richmond, Virginia. We're doing it in Richmond because it's a good central part of the state to go to. Plus, the SBA's goal is to bring these program managers to areas outside of the DC area specific. So Richmond is far enough away from them to want to engage with more people that may not be meeting with them all the time like they do up in Northern Virginia. But we'll get that out to everybody. It's low cost. It's just $50 for the whole full day. It helps pay for some of the food and the cocktail hour we're going to have at the end of the day to do some networking. And any questions, please let me know, and I'll forward information. I'll add everybody to my newsletter. If there's any other question, forever hold your peace here. Otherwise, we'll look forward to, I'll send the presentations to everybody in PDF format and add everybody to my monthly newsletter. And if you're not already on that list, and I'll send you information about our upcoming sessions and training. And good luck out there. It's a long road, and hopefully you can look at the SBIR program as being one of those early stage funding sources to help you establish your company and product. Any final words, Mary?
Just if people do think of additional questions, please don't hesitate to call me or email. I'm happy to answer any other questions at any time.
Great. I will CC Mary in the email I send out, so everybody has her email directly, and you can contact her if you need to. With that, thank you very much, everybody, and good luck out there. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.